Let's go back up here and see if it started. Yeah, hi everybody. How are you? Welcome to Free Yourself podcast, Healing Hearts and Minds, where we explore the depths of human consciousness, the power of the mind and the heart as we journey toward well-being in this process of awakening. So I'm your host, Jade Rattan. And today I wanted to talk about compassion of self. What exactly is compassion and how we can be more compassionate to ourselves? We have come from an age, a time, eons of programming. So freeing yourself really begins with understanding that our brain and our thoughts, about 95% of them are probably pre-programmed, which means that we're always living from our past or we're thinking about the future, and we're not in the present moment very often, which is where true connection is, presence, connecting within, which connects us to everything, including that which is without or outside of ourselves, source, nature, connecting in. And so compassion is about with passion, with heart. I don't mean passion in the sexual sense, but passion with heart, with heart. How do we communicate more with heart and get out of our heads? Our heads are going to be full of fear, trepidation, judgment. And again, I mean, clearly not all the time, we choose. We choose whether we're going to listen to the judgments, listen to that critic that goes off in our minds or not. In order to be able to hear it, because remember that when you're used to saying anything in your mind, it becomes hardwired. It's a habit. Just like I bet you in the morning, you pretty much get up and you do the same thing. You have your routine. That's programming. So very little of our time is really spent out of the program. And the only way to be out of the program is to be in the present moment. The only way to be with heart, connected consciously to heart, is in the now, in the present moment. And often we have to close our eyes just to prevent the distraction of all our senses, our eyes, our ears, our touch, everything. We're constantly being diverted outside of ourselves through our senses. And so sometimes it's helpful to close your eyes. And this is where meditation really just means consciousness. It means awareness. So when you're meditating with your eyes closed, you can also meditate with your eyes open. But in the beginning, it really helps to have your eyes closed because of all the constant distractions. And once you know how to access inside of yourself and go into your heart, you can even do that while you're walking, while your eyes are open, while you're sitting in your car at that red light and you're feeling impatient, like this is the longest light in the world. And instead, we can just go inside and connect within. And there you will find the stillness and the consciousness and the awareness that we need to do what we want to do what we want to do, not what we're programmed to do. Often they're very confusing. We think that what we want to do is what we're programmed to do because the program actually brings a sense of comfort. It's already done. The pattern's already set. The habits already created. So you can just relax. It's not until we go into the unknown or want to create new patterns, new thoughts, new beliefs. So I've had people ask me questions about how do you remove guilt? How do you make the changes? The first step in any change is to recognize that the belief or the pattern you got in to begin with was created by repetition. So if every time you make a mistake, you say something like, oh, God, I'm so stupid, or anything like that, and you keep repeating it, it becomes a belief. A belief is just a repeated idea. So a lot of our negative ideas or beliefs are just created from a thought that was repeated over and over and over again. And it could have been a thought that was repeated out loud by one of your parents or your siblings when you're growing up, because these things get listened to and they get hardwired in. And then when you're starting to create your own critical thinking skills between the ages of 7 and 12, you start to question and you start to wonder. And you're opening up and you're not just accepting everything as truth. When that happens, that's such a wonderful thing. You're starting to question. But often we don't replace the old beliefs with new ones, because the only way that's going to happen is when we consciously do it. And most of us are operating in the unconscious. We're just doing our routes, our journey, or our day. And your day is probably the same or very similar to yesterday. And your tomorrow may be very similar to the day before. So you see how in that comfort, in that relaxation, in that routine, you experience some comfort, but you will not experience the changes you want. As long as we're set in the old ways and in the old beliefs, we can't really move into the newness. So that requires a tolerance for discomfort. Whenever we're about ready to make changes in our lives, changes that are changes we want, changes we've been asking ourselves for, that we've been striving for, the only way that's going to happen is if we start to change the stinking thinking. I call it stinking thinking. It's just the old beliefs. So if I hear an old belief, and if it's negative, I already know that it's old and it needs to be changed. Because if you want an exciting new life, if you want more joy and more happiness, then these negative, punishing, critical thinking thoughts that you have, they really need to be changed, and they have to be changed in the moment. So this is what I tell clients to do, and I'm going to recommend you do it. You write a list of all those negative thoughts that keep coming up over and over again on one half of the page. Get a piece of paper, write down on one half of the page all the negative thoughts that you've been telling yourself for years. Now recognize the older you are, the longer they've been around. They're not going to disappear right away. You've been using them for years against yourself. Now we need to use some really positive things to not only counterbalance that and counteract that and create the new thought, which creates the new feelings, which creates the new identity. We are stuck in identities because of the programs. And if you want a new identity to create because you're not happy with the one you have, you can do it. But the work is being conscious of the thinking that's keeping you stuck in that identity. So people who say, oh, that's just the way I am, I'm sure you've heard it. I'm sure you may even have used it. I remember using it a long time ago. That's such a lie. It's not possible. You're just 2 years old then. You mean you haven't changed since you were 2 or 10 or 20 or 30? Seriously? We're constantly changing, but we don't like it when we're uncomfortable. So as soon as you're uncomfortable, you're more likely to change because you're questioning, you're using a new thought, and you have to keep using that thought over and over again. So that's what affirmations are good for. Affirmations do work. So you take the one side of the paper that says, I am not good enough. I don't know a human being that doesn't have that program. And if you think that program is gone just through one, I am good enough, probably not going to happen because you had that I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. I'm not good. You've had these thoughts for a long time. So now we have to go to the other side and we have to say, okay, that's the lie. Even if it feels like the truth, it's not. How do I know that for sure? Because I know God, source, whatever you want to call it that created you, which wasn't you, doesn't make junk. You were made with purpose. You were made with a mission. You were made, especially made, to be who you are. There's no one else to do that. All the rest are taken. You were made with God's energy, which is love energy. Do you think that you would want your children to be shooting all over themselves? You should be this, you should be that, beating themselves up. Would you want your children to do that? Because that's what we're doing to ourselves. We're doing that to the little person inside of us, the person that believed all those truths from 1 to 7 or 8 or 9 or 10. And that inner child, which we call the inner child, is still around and still has feelings and is still listening to that old belief system. So even though the lie feels like the truth, you now have to accept the truth, which is going to feel like a lie. And the truth is that God does not make mistakes, does not make junk. There's no accident. You're being here on this planet at this time. Embrace that, because honoring self is honoring God. You are not separate. If you're not separate from your source, you can't be. What do you think is beating that heart of yours? Where's that energy inside your body coming from? Think about that. Honoring self is honoring God, because God created you and God creates only perfection. Now, in our humanness, we might be able to say, well, that's BS. There's no way I'm perfect. Well, yes, in the human terms, maybe not, but that's not who you are. You are a spirit having a human experience. And that human experience is meant to make quote unquote mistakes, is meant to err, is meant to do all the things that you criticize it. Why? So you can learn. How else are you going to learn? If we all came in like robots, all knowing everything, all knowing the same thing, it would be so boring. It would be really boring. Can you imagine? Everybody like your mother or your sister or even you, everybody, and everybody doing everything perfectly all the time, or what you think is perfect. Because think about that. As a human, the idea of perfection is kind of interesting. Everybody's idea of perfection is different. So there is no perfection. There's absolutely no perfection. And in fact, that is one of the hardest things to overcome as a human, is to let yourself off the hook. Because the only way you can be truly free is to be willing to learn, is to be willing to try things, to slip into that unknown space where it's uncomfortable so you can learn something differently. And as you learn that, just like riding a bike, you might fall off a couple of times, but that's the only way to riding it. Wasn't it worth it once you started riding that bicycle? Wasn't it worth all the falls? But did you tell yourself, I'm going to get on that bike and I'm going to ride it I'm going to ride it correctly the first time? No, you probably brought a lot of fears in with you. You were afraid of falling. Of course we were. We were afraid that the person holding the bike up as we were starting to pedal was going to let go. Oh my God, when they let go, what's going to happen? Well, that's kind of what happens to us even now. When we go into the unknown and we get out of the programs, we often go into anxiety. Unless it's something that we really understand, that the discomfort, the uncomfortableness is just that we're stepping out of patterns that no longer serve us. The patterns that no longer serve us, they're the patterns that we want to change. So on the other side of the paper, you have to take a negative and turn it into positive, which is what you're going to be doing in your mind every day until it sticks, until it becomes the repetitive thought that the old belief was. Only this time, with the new belief, you're actually going to be benefiting by having some good feelings and remembering who you truly are and living in the truth. Because the truth is not that you are less, that you're not more, you're not enough. That is not the truth of who you are. That's impossible if you really think about it. The issue is we don't question our thoughts enough because we're not in stillness enough. We need to be quiet enough to actually hear our own thoughts, and they're not even our own, to be quite honest. They're just thoughts from the past. Thoughts from the past bring memories from the past, which brings feelings from the past. And before you know it, you're actually physically in the past. Why? Because the human body, when it responds to the past or when it responds to a thought, it doesn't know the difference. It's not objective. It doesn't know the difference between the past, the present, and the future in terms of how it responds. So if you think about the past, the body responds as if it's happening right now. That means every time you go back to that negative thought or that trauma, you're re-traumatizing. The body is getting re-traumatized. So processing something over and over and over again in traditional therapy does not work. And that's why I chose spiritual therapy, because in the spirit it works. And that is because you don't take the ego as self. You see that the ego was created by self, but the self is the one that's watching. Think about that. Who's listening when you're talking to yourself? When you're saying, I'm not enough, or I don't have what it takes, I'm a failure. Who's listening to that? The one that's listening is not going to buy it. It's not true. The only thing that gets us out of guilt, out of shame, out of all the negativity that we carry around us is us. And how do we do that? By becoming conscious. And how do we become conscious? By slowing things down enough to actually listen to ourselves. What is compassionate communication? It's actually listening to yourself. If you have compassionate communication with another person, that means somebody has to listen and somebody has to talk. If there's no one listening, there's no communication. It takes two to communicate. So who's listening when you're communicating inside of that mind of yours? When you listen with compassion, you listen with a desire to understand. You may not agree with that person. You may feel differently. Your experience may be different. But compassionate communication means that you listen and you speak from the heart without blame, taking full responsibility for your feelings, for your experience. It is yours after all. You can say, well, the devil made me do it. Or you can say, he made me do it. She made me do it. You can blame all you want and you're going to stay stuck. You can blame everybody for where you're at and you won't go anywhere. It's not a bad thing to do or a good thing to do. It's just you're not going to make the changes you want. So you're going to be defeating yourself by blaming other people. You might feel like it puts you in the right, so it makes you feel better because now you're right. If they're wrong, you can make yourself right and feel better. But since it's not in the truth, it's not from love. If it's not from love and not from compassion, it's not from truth. And if you're not living in the truth, you're not going to feel the benefits from awakening. If you're not living in the truth, you're not going to feel the benefits of all the love and all the light and all the positive things are happening. Because if you just listen to the news and the TV, the world's just a mess. There's nothing good in it. And it's easy to stay stuck there because they want you to. That way you're enslaved. If you stay negative, they have you exactly where they want you. You're much more controllable when you're in fear. But fear is false evidence appearing real, appearing real. The news you're watching appears real. How much of it's real? I can't say, to be quite honest. I just know that it's all negative. And how I'm going to feel after watching that is not good. If you want to feel good, you can control that. This is the good news. We have control over our minds, or our minds have control over us. What's your choice? What's it going to be? And the only way that you can make that choice is to slow things down enough and start to listen to yourself with heart and compassion. You didn't get there by yourself. You didn't adopt all that negativity because that's who you were. You're a negative person. You came in like everybody else, pure, full of love, full of hope, pure. You are. We just have all this stuff that we have to release, that we've bought, that we believed, that is not the truth of who you are. And as I rise and accept more and more of the loving person that I am, and as I allow my identity to shift, which is, by the way, always requires some amount of fear that I go through every time I make a shift, every time I change, I step into the unknown, I experience the fear, and I choose love, but through gratitude. I can't get to just fear love. I can't do that jump. That's what they say. You get to love, you get to fear, to love by leaving fear and going into love. But it's the steps of gratitude. Start thinking of one thing that you're grateful for, that you can breathe, that you're not in pain at this moment. Just one thing, and build on it. And before you know it, you're going to be thinking of the positive things in your life. And you're going to be coming out of it. But it's almost like riding an elevator. It feels like that to me anyway. You're riding an elevator when you're down and you bought into the false, and you bought into the lies, and then you go, okay, I've had enough of this. I'm tired of suffering. I'm tired of trying to make life the way I want it. I just want to surrender and love and enjoy life, love my life. To do that, you got to let go. You got to be willing to step into the mystery. You got to be willing to be uncomfortable, and you got to be willing to love who you truly are, which is your spirit, not your ego. Loving your ego, this is why traditional therapy doesn't work, because loving your ego is never going to work. Your ego is not for that purpose. Your heart is for that purpose. Your ego will always remind you that you're not good enough. It's not your best friend. But it is the way that we start to overcome the thoughts of the ego, is with the thoughts of the spirit. And the thoughts of the spirit are this: you are abundance. You are whole. You are a loving child of God. You are magnificent. You are expansive, much greater than you've let yourself experience, because it's so fearful to let ourselves expand. Allow it, try it, test it out. See what happens. If you do something for yourself that you don't usually do, that you've always wanted to do, and see how you feel, your feelings will tell you. Our feelings don't lie. The body does not lie. So you can tell everybody you're feeling great, but if your body's not feeling great, you're just kidding yourself. The body won't lie. You just have to get quiet enough to really listen to it, just like you have to get quiet enough to listen to your children, to your spouse, to your friends when they call you. It's the same thing. They call you, they need to talk, they need to share. You need to just listen. And with that listening, you'll hear the answers you need. With that listening, they might come to their own answers. You don't even have to give it to them. Let them unfold. Let yourself unfold. Recognize we're all in this together. It's called the oneness, unity. That's what we're moving toward. And we're all in this together. It's no longer pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. That's what got us partly into this mess. That was one of the things that got us into this mess, is loneliness, alone, doing it all by yourself all the time. We were never meant to do that. We're social animals. We have a deep need to belong, to participate, to work together, to change this planet into the planet that we deserve, a planet of love, a planet full of potential, a planet of goodness, of trust, of abundance for everyone. Not me, as long as I have my abundance, that's all that matters. Abundance for all, because we are all interconnected. We are truly interconnected with each other. Have you ever walked into a house where somebody's had an argument? You can feel the energy. If you were totally separated, you wouldn't feel that. You wouldn't feel the energy of other people. But we do. We're interconnected. Just stand out in the middle of nature and you feel the interconnectedness of everything, perfectly divine. You don't say, oh, you see that fallen tree? That's a mistake. We go out to nature. And what's beautiful about it is when we're in nature, we see the balance. We have the same potential. That balance is within us. It's within all of us. And as we each individually find that balance, find that centeredness, align within, as we do that, we're also aligning with everyone. Whatever you do for yourself that's good is good for everyone. If you keep your eyes on yourself and you do loving things for yourself, everybody benefits. You can't go wrong. But if you're busy trying to take care of everybody else and you're not taking care of yourself, I guarantee you that's not going to work. You're going to get too tired, too hungry, too angry, too down. Because all that energy is going out. You need to be able to receive. Giving and receiving is the same. But if you're not allowing yourself to receive as you're giving, you're going to get depleted. So don't make it a job to love yourself. Recognize that by loving yourself, if you really want to love other people, if you really want to help other people, help yourself. If you want to help your children, stop focusing on them. Help yourself, because children don't learn from words. They learn by watching through actions. It's like the parent that says, hey, I don't want you to smoke. How did that work? For me, it didn't work. I ended up smoking. Children imitate. And we're all children. Children have temper tantrums when things don't go their way. So do adults. When we decide that we want life to go in a certain direction and it doesn't, you may not be kicking and screaming on the floor, but I guarantee you're kicking and screaming in here, in your heads, in your minds, and you're feeling bad, just like that child does. We're all the same and we're all interconnected. Loving yourself is the most important thing you can do for you, for all the people you love, for the people you don't know, for the planet, for the universe, for your creator. The negative is never going to give you that. So transpose those negative thoughts into positive, from I'm not enough to I am enough. How do I know? Because God doesn't make mistakes. Because I'm a beautiful, perfect child of God in spirit. And I'm just having a heck of an experience on this planet as a human, fumbling and falling and learning how to do so many things. I'm still learning. I'm 71 and I'm still learning. We're going to learn till we die, so we're going to make mistakes till we die. Are you going to let yourself off the hook and allow yourself to also be fully human as the experience? As the experience of a fully human, because once this lifetime is over, you'll go back into pure spirit and you won't have to deal with all this. But you'll have learned so much if you allow it. But if you beat yourself up while you're learning, you won't allow that, because you'll be too afraid to make a mistake and you'll keep yourself small. instead of allowing for the expansion. Expansion is self-love. Self-love is expansion. You are uniquely made to be who you are. That's all we have to do is step into our authentic self. And if anybody guilt trips you about who that self should be, know that that's their projection, because guilt is of the ego. It is not truth. Guilt is not truth. It is of the ego, and it's a way that the ego uses to keep us enslaved, small, fearful. Then we're controllable. The questioning mind is the way out of this. The unknown, the discomfort, into the new beginning. You can do this. If I can do it, anybody can do it. I'm no different than you. Anyway, I love you, and I hope you got something out of it, because that's why I'm doing this. My wish and my hope and my prayer is that this will help you or help somebody that you know, so that they can elevate, rise up, and get out of the muck of the past. That's all it is. Mucky past. Love you.